In my small town, everyone knew about the abandoned stretch of highway that ran through the dense, forgotten forest on the outskirts. It was said to be cursed, a place where strange things happened and where the shadows were thicker than anywhere else. But being young and foolish, I didn't pay attention to the old legends. I was just a truck driver looking to make a delivery on time. That night, my dispatcher called in a last-minute job, transporting a load of furniture to a new development on the other side of the forest. The only way to get there quickly was to take that haunted stretch of highway. I was running late and figured the quickest route was the best option. Ghost stories be damned. I left the loading dock just as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning a deep indigo. The road was desolate, as expected, and the air was heavy with an eerie silence. My headlights cut through the encroaching darkness as I drove deeper into the forest, the trees arching overhead like a tunnel of gnarled fingers. As I settled into the long drive, I turned on the radio to keep myself company. The familiar twang of country music filled the cab, and I relaxed a little, focusing on the hum of the engine and the rhythm of the road. After a while, static interrupted the music. I fiddled with the dial, trying to find a clear station, but all I got was more static interspersed with strange, garbled voices that sounded like distant whispers. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off as a quirk of the old radio. I continued down the highway, the truck's engine a constant roar in the silence. Then, out of nowhere, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I glanced to my right and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was a figure standing in the middle of the road, a woman dressed in white, her long hair cascading over her shoulders. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as I struggled to keep control of the truck. The woman stood motionless, her face obscured by shadows, but I could feel her eyes on me. The truck skidded to a stop mere feet from where she stood, and my heart pounded in my chest. I blinked, and she was gone. The road was empty, the forest silent except for the rustling of leaves in the breeze. I sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. It must have been a trick of the light, a figment of my tired mind. I took a deep breath and continued driving, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The road stretched on, and the night seemed to grow darker and more oppressive. A few miles down the road, the truck's headlights flickered and dimmed, and the engine sputtered before dying completely. I coasted to a stop, cursing under my breath. The dashboard was dark, the radio silent. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the cab, the night air cold against my skin. I popped the hood and inspected the engine, but everything seemed fine. The truck should have been running, but it wasn't. I felt a prickle of unease as I heard a faint noise behind me, like the sound of footsteps approaching. I spun around, shining the flashlight into the darkness. The beam cut through the shadows, revealing nothing but trees and the empty road. I was about to turn back to the truck when I saw it again. The woman in white, standing just beyond the reach of the light. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I was frozen, unable to look away. She raised her arm slowly, pointing at something behind me. Dread coiled in my stomach as I turned around. There, etched into the truck's metal surface, were deep, jagged scratches. It looked like something had clawed at it with ferocious intensity. My pulse quickened, and I knew I needed to get out of there. I climbed back into the cab, trying the ignition again. The engine roared to life, and relief flooded through me. I glanced out the window to see the woman was gone, as if she had never been there at all. With a shaky breath, I floored the gas pedal, desperate to leave that cursed road behind. As I drove, I could feel the weight of eyes on me, the sensation of being followed. When I finally reached the development, I parked and jumped out, eager to get as far from the truck as possible. The delivery went smoothly, but the memory of that night haunted me. I couldn't forget the woman's piercing gaze or the chilling scratches on the truck. Back in town, I asked some of the older residents about the highway. They shared stories of accidents and strange occurrences, of ghostly figures and voices on the wind. It was said that the highway was built on cursed land, a place where spirits lingered, unable to move on. I've driven many roads since that night, but I've never gone back to that stretch of highway, Some say it's just an old legend, a tale to keep people away from the woods. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the terror of that night drive. Even now, when I'm out on the road, I sometimes catch a glimpse of white out of the corner of my eye, and every time I wonder if it's her, waiting for the next unlucky traveler to cross her path. The long-haul trucking job had always suited me. Driving at night, under a sky full of stars, the hum of the engine as my only companion. There was a freedom to it, a sense of solitude and peace that I couldn't find anywhere else. But sometimes, the quiet roads could also be unsettling, as if the darkness was hiding something just out of sight. I had been driving for hours, delivering a load of electronics across the state. The night was thick with fog, and the highway was deserted, except for the occasional distant headlights of another vehicle. I preferred it that way. Less traffic, less hassle. I had heard stories from other truckers about a maniac driver who haunted these roads, a ghostly figure who would appear out of nowhere and cause accidents before vanishing into the night. But I dismissed them as urban legends, tales to scare the newbies. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the gloom. My eyes were tired, but I was close to my destination, just another few hours to go. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but it was just static, crackling through the speakers. Suddenly, I noticed headlights in my mirrors, growing larger as they approached rapidly. I checked the speedometer. I wasn't going slow, but this vehicle was gaining on me fast. It was a large truck, its headlights glaring in the darkness, barreling down the road as if it owned it. I moved to the right lane, expecting it to pass, but instead, it stayed right behind me, its lights blinding in my mirrors. Annoyed, I flicked on my high beams to signal it to back off, but it didn't budge. The truck swerved into the left lane and pulled up alongside me. I glanced over, trying to see the driver, but the cab was dark, the windows tinted and impenetrable. A chill ran down my spine as the trucker honked the horn, a loud, grating sound that echoed through the night. Without warning, the truck swerved into my lane, forcing me toward the shoulder. I hit the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. My heart pounded in my chest as the truck sped ahead, its taillights disappearing into the fog. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Maybe it was just some jerk trying to scare me. But the fear lingered, a gnawing unease that I couldn't shake. I continued down the highway, my eyes scanning the road for any sign of the truck. About 10 miles later, I saw it again, parked at the side of the road, its hazard lights flashing. I slowed down, debating whether to stop, but something about the truck felt wrong, like a trap waiting to be sprung. I sped up, intending to drive past it, when the truck's engine roared to life. It pulled back onto the road behind me, its headlights glaring in my mirrors once more. Panic surged through me, and I floored the gas pedal, the truck following closely. The road twisted and turned, and the truck matched every move, staying right on my tail. I took an exit onto a narrow, winding road, hoping to lose the truck in the maze of back roads. But it followed, relentless, its horn blaring as it gained on me. The road led to an old, abandoned rest stop, its windows boarded up, and the parking lot overgrown with weeds. I swung the rig into the lot, the tires skidding on the gravel as I came to a stop. The truck pulled in behind me, blocking my exit. I could see its driver silhouetted in the cab, a shadowy figure watching me. My breath caught in my throat as I reached for my phone, but there was no signal out here in the middle of nowhere. The driver got out of the truck, moving with deliberate slowness. I could make out the glint of something metallic in his hand, a crowbar or a wrench maybe. He started toward me, his steps measured and confident, like a predator closing in on its prey. I locked the doors and fumbled for something to defend myself, but the cab was empty except for a flashlight and some paperwork. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. Just as the man reached my truck, I heard the distant wail of a siren, the flashing lights of a patrol car cutting through the fog. The man hesitated, glancing back at the highway, then turned and sprinted back to his truck. He jumped into the cab and sped off, the engine roaring as he disappeared into the night. The patrol car pulled into the rest stop, and an officer approached my rig, a look of concern on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked, shining his flashlight through the window. I nodded, still shaken. "Yeah, I think so. There was a trucker. He tried to run me off the road." The officer listened, his expression grim. "You're not the first to report something like this. We've had a few incidents lately, but we haven't been able to catch him." He took my statement and assured me they'd keep an eye out, then waited while I got back on the road. As I drove away, the fear lingered, a shadow in the back of my mind. I reached my destination without further incident, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I still drive those highways, always on the lookout for the phantom trucker with his blinding headlights and relentless pursuit. And every time I see a pair of headlights in my mirrors, I wonder if it's him, waiting for the next driver to terrorize on those lonely, fog-shrouded roads. I was a long-haul truck driver for nearly 15 years, hauling freight across the country and witnessing the many peculiar sights that fill America's highways. But nothing compares to the night I encountered something I still can't fully explain, something that still haunts my dreams whenever I close my eyes. It was a cold autumn night, and I was driving through the remote stretches of Montana, where the roads cut through vast empty plains under a sky blanketed with stars. My route was long and lonely, perfect for a man who enjoyed solitude. I was hauling a load of timber to Seattle, making my way through the deserted two-lane highways that stretched like black ribbons into the distance. Around midnight, the radio began to lose signal, the music fading into static. I turned it off, preferring the low rumble of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the tires on the pavement to fill the silence. The road was dark, and the only illumination came from my headlights slicing through the night. As I rounded a bend, I noticed something odd on the side of the road up ahead. A faint figure was illuminated by the headlights, standing still in the tall grass just beyond the shoulder. I squinted, trying to make out details as I drew closer. It was a man, dressed in a tattered jacket and jeans, with wild hair that seemed to move independently of the gentle breeze. I slowed down, instinctively cautious, unsure whether he needed help or posed a threat. As I approached, the figure stepped into the road, forcing me to brake hard. My truck came to a stop a few feet away, the engine idling as I watched him warily from the cab. His face was obscured by shadows, but his eyes glinted in the headlights, and I felt a chill run down my spine. There was something unsettling about his presence, something that set my nerves on edge. I rolled down the window, my hand hovering near the emergency brake. "You okay?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly raised an arm and pointed down the road, a long, bony finger indicating the direction I was headed. The gesture was deliberate, almost mechanical, and it filled me with a sense of foreboding. "Is there something wrong up ahead?" I asked, trying to make sense of his warning. He lowered his arm, stepping closer to the truck. As he moved into the light, I saw his face clearly for the first time, and I wished I hadn't. His skin was pale and sallow, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. His eyes were dark, hollow pits, filled with an unsettling emptiness. "There's something you shouldn't see," he said, in a voice that was barely more than a whisper, yet it carried an unnerving weight, something that doesn't belong. I wanted to get away from him, to drive off and put as much distance as I could between myself and that haunting gaze. But something in his words stirred a morbid curiosity, a need to understand what he meant. "What is it?" I asked, against my better judgment. He didn't answer, just turned and walked back into the darkness, vanishing into the night as if he had never been there at all. I sat there for a moment, the engine rumbling beneath me, trying to decide what to do. Every instinct told me to leave, to forget the encounter and continue my journey. But the curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I shifted the truck into gear and continued down the road. The miles passed slowly, each one stretching longer as the night deepened around me. The road was eerily empty, with no signs of life except for the occasional animal darting across the pavement. I drove on, the memory of the man's warning echoing in my mind. Then, as I crested a hill, I saw it. A twisted mass of metal lay sprawled across the road, the remains of a brutal collision. Two vehicles, one a car and the other a semi-truck, had collided head-on. The wreckage scattered across the highway like the bones of some ancient beast. Flames flickered at the edges, casting an eerie glow on the devastation. I brought my truck to a halt, the headlights illuminating the scene with an otherworldly clarity. There were no emergency vehicles, no flashing lights or signs of rescue, just silence, broken only by the crackle of flames and the faint groan of cooling metal. I climbed out of the cab, my heart pounding as I approached the wreckage. The stench of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air, mingling with a sickly sweet odor that turned my stomach. As I drew closer, I saw them, figures trapped in the vehicles, their bodies contorted and still. My breath caught in my throat as I realized they weren't moving, that there was no sign of life. And then I saw something else. Standing just beyond the wreckage, partially obscured by smoke, was the man I had seen on the roadside. He watched me with those same hollow eyes, a faint smile playing on his lips. "What is this?" I shouted, fear and anger mingling in my voice. He didn't answer, just turned away and vanished into the darkness once more. I stumbled back to my truck, my mind reeling from the horror of what I had seen. As I sat behind the wheel, trying to make sense of it all, I caught sight of something in the rearview mirror. The wreckage was gone. The road was empty, stretching into the distance as if nothing had ever been there. No signs of the crash, no twisted metal or smoldering flames, just darkness, silent and unyielding. I drove on, my mind numb with disbelief and fear. I didn't stop until I reached the next town, where I spent the night in a cheap motel, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. I never spoke of that night to anyone, unsure whether it was a dream or something far more sinister. But every time I drive that stretch of road, I keep my eyes open for any sign of the man with hollow eyes and the wreckage that may or may not exist. And I wonder if one day I'll see them again.